It's your man George Page coming to you live on YouTube. As you know, there's been a lot with the whole big George Floyd thing going on. There's a lot of arrests, protests, and everything else. And today, I believe, is the day when they're officially going to bury him. He's going to be buried in his hometown of Houston, Texas. George originally came from my home state of North Carolina. He was born in Winston-Salem. He has a sister that lives in Fayetteville, like my sister. But before this, I want to give a moment of silence to our brother Big George. All right, so let's get to business. Now, I was doing some googling. I was gonna, Google stuff on George, but like everybody else, I use Google as my search engine. And while I was searching, I put in George. I two things popped up that kind of just, you know, kind of concerned me, kind of vexed me a bit. The first one was George's arrest history. Why is that important? I mean, I don't know why why it's even in Google. I mean, that shouldn't even be anybody's mind what he got arrested for. Yes, he was a suspect in forgery, but that's not either here or there. But then another name came up, another George, a George that people like to forget, George Stinney Jr. Now, if you don't never heard the story of George Stinney, it's like one of the many stories like with uh, um, of how racism and how back in the day where black people were chose or picked for a crime they never committed. Like Emmett Till and many others, and how we were victims of the system. Now, George Stinney was born October the 16th of no, October the 21st of 1929, and in Pinewood, South Carolina. But he was murdered by execution in October. I mean, in June of June 16th of 1944. Now, in Columbia State Penitentiary. Now, if you pay attention to the numbers, he was born in 29, died in 44. So that tells you he was around almost 15 years old when he was murdered. 15, almost 15, 14-year-old boy executed in the chair what they call Old Sparky. You know, and it was just the crime was of double homicide, where he was accused of killing two little white girls who were 8 and 11 years old. There was no witnesses other than what the police said. There was no statement. The trial was 2 hours, and the jury convicted him in 10. There were no representative because back in those days, if you couldn't vote, especially black people, you did not have the right to sit on a jury. As you all know, currently, if you vote, if you call for jury service, you gotta go. But black people was not given the opportunity because back then we were not treated as equal humans. George had a lawyer, and the lawyer didn't care. He didn't even cross-examine the police or anything because he wanted to become the next politician or mayor or something. And then his own family was threatened with lynching if they stayed in town. His mother Aime and his father Big George. He had a sister named Kathy. I don't know if she's still around. That's been almost over 70 years ago, if she's still living, or if there are any left members of the Stinney family. He was only 5'2", 90 pounds. How can a boy that size kill two little girls? That's impossible. But because they needed a scapegoat, they pointed at him because he saw the girls and waved. Their bodies were found in a ditch. And he saw them maybe a few hours before. Honest, on the bottom is a picture on his way to the execution. He was holding the Bible. This is a little boy. This is somebody's child. Because he was so small, they had to tie him to the electric chair, and then use the Bible as a like we put a baby into a into a crib, like into a chair. You had to give them a booster seat. They used the Bible as a booster seat. Those motherfuckers. George was buried in Canada. Not Canada. He wouldn't bet off in Canada if we were able to get to Canada, but he was buried in a cemetery called named Canada. I forgot the whole name of it, but you can search it and you can find it. Just Google George Stinney. But this was murder. And here, the story goes that he's been exonerated 70 years later after his murder. What it was that there was a deathbed confession made by a man. This man's family was very rich and very white. So they wanted to protect their son. They decided to point, like, this basic story. You know what the name picnic come from? Picnic, pick a nigga. That's what it was. They picked a nigga. They picked a 14-year-old, 5'2", 90-pound soaking wet boy who could possibly kill 2 young girls with his bare hands by himself. It's just the bullshit of the justice system. There's been many cases, like I said, Emmett Till. There was a case years ago where it was, 5 young black men who were accused of raping a woman, but they never did anything. Black soldiers came home, like this is 44, and this is around the tail end of World War II, and black soldiers coming home getting attacked and beaten, murdered, wearing a uniform which they earned the right to wear. Many of these same white people didn't have the courage to go and volunteer for their country. George Stinney should have grown up to be just like a regular kid, enjoy his life, grow up, had a family, had children. See, this is also, if you ever saw the movie The Green Mile, many believe that this was the basis for the movie. As you know, the character John Coffey was this big man. He supposed to have killed these 2 little girls. And at the end of the movie, you found out it was this white guy who was working for the family that killed the 2 little girls. There's a video out. There's a movie done some time ago, and it was a story of about George Stinney. And I watched a clip of it at the end of the execution, and it really made me want to cry. Part of me wish that I often say that we wish we had superheroes. Like, I don't know, we wish we had spirits of vengeance to avenge our fallen brothers and sisters. It's sad that this boy was killed, murdered by the state, by probably one of the second or third most racist states in the South when it comes down to black people. Mississippi, Alabama, and also I'm gonna say South Carolina. I remember still years ago that they finally took off outlawing interracial marriages off the law, and that was almost 20 years ago. It's been pretty much nearly 80 years since the murder of George Stinney. And you know what? Even now, there's injustice. There's been stories of men, especially black men, on death row, finally get exonerated for a crime they never committed. That's because somebody pointed at them and said that's the one, that's him. He looks like him, it could be him. And evidence that's given to juries. And you also remember, a lot of black people can't afford a high price of lawyer, like OJ did when he had his trial. You get the public defender. Most of the time they just half-ass it. They don't have the resources as the prosecutor also have, like investigators and science labs and stuff like that. George Stinney was 14 years old, and the state of North Carolina murdered him. If George had any living family members, that state owes him and his family reparations. There's many stories we all know of men who were convicted of a crime they didn't commit and got out, and the state had to pay them. That's why some states are going broke, especially in the South, because all the money they had to hand out to those people they were falsely accused of a crime. This young boy should have died an old man surrounded by his grandchildren, his children, and his great-grandchildren. Not a little boy sitting on a Bible as he's getting shocked with thousands of volts through his body. As the mask fell off, his tears was falling. He probably also defecated and pissed on himself. For you people out there who don't care about my people, who don't care about black lives, who feel that the police and the law have the right to kill us or execute us for just the little bit of no evidence to next to none, you're the problem, not us. For all the Emmett Tills, Sandra Blands, Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, Freddie Gray, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Botham Jean, Philando Castile, Aime Abdallah. Now, that's the name some people forget. Aime Abdallah was a black man shot 40 times by New York PD. He called in a crime, and he stood off the side, and he smoked a cigarette. And because they thought someone was firing a gun, they shot him 40 times just because he flicked a lighter. And he wasn't really African. He was an African American. He was a man from Africa trying to follow the American dream like so many other our brothers and sisters. We're talking about defunding the police. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. But the system has to change. And it's not going to happen under this presidency or even the next. Like I said before, the president's job is not really, he's not really the boss of America. He's just the general manager. It's the people of, and the Senate and the Congress. That's the ones who really could make the law. And also I'm going to put in this was information given to me by a friend of mine, Aime. As you know, I talked about Aime. She's a professional bodybuilder. She lives in England. That the Supreme Court had changed the policy where the police's job is not to protect and serve, but to enforce the law. So remind the police that they need to take that protect and serve bullshit off their cars. They're no better than overseers. I want to say rest in peace to my brother, George Stinney. He's a George like me, like George Floyd. I hope you're up in heaven. Or maybe you got a chance to be reincarnated. You don't have to be a white man. Maybe good to be a black man again. This is your man, George Page. Like, subscribe. Don't subscribe. I'm out.